Okay, Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Inshallah, today for Sciences of Hadith, for this section 4, we will go through the issue of Ijtihad and Khabar al-Ahad. And at the same time, while doing so, we will look at the definitions of Hadith Mutawatir and Hadith Ahad, which is basically one of the ways to categorize hadith based on the number of transmitters. So inshallah, throughout the next half an hour to 45 minutes, inshallah we will go through this. I hope the live stream is also working on YouTube. I had some difficulties yesterday. However, I've checked on Facebook and Twitter, it's working, inshallah. Shall we proceed? But before that, I hope all of you are doing well. For this week, we will only have one live lecture, and I will provide you with a link for another video for you to watch on Thursday, inshallah. I'll give it to you the day before. A lecture by Dr. or Professor Jonathan Brown, who is an expert in hadith studies. So inshallah, I'll provide the link via WhatsApp and also Facebook and Twitter, so that you may benefit from that video, inshallah. As for your final assessment, since this is a multiple section and across the board it will be the same, for your final assessment you will have an open book exam instead of a sit-in final exam. Whatever it is, we hope that now we are in the RMCO stage, recovery MCO stage. We hope that things will get better, inshallah, and hopefully the coming semester 1, 2020-2021, we can resume with face-to-face classes, inshallah. So that semester will begin in October, so hopefully things will get back to normal, inshallah. But for the time being, for this semester, we'll have to suffice with online classes, since we are not able to conduct face-to-face classes. As for me, I find this a bit difficult, but inshallah, we'll overcome this together, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Okay. Let's begin. So we will look at the issue of Ijtihad and Akhbar al-Ahad. Yeah, Ijtihad and Akhbar al-Ahad. I'm sure most of you are quite familiar with this term Ijtihad. We often come across this term Ijtihad. And normally when we mention the word Ijtihad, we associate it with Ijtihad in matters of fiqh, because for example, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, the scholars of fiqh, or the founders of the schools of fiqh, they are considered to be mujtahid, one who exercises the ijtihad. But as we will see, ijtihad also plays an important role when it comes to hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay. So sunnah or hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on the basis of the number of transmitters, can be divided into two. Firstly, mutawatir, and secondly, ahad. So you have mutawatir and ahad. Mutawatir can be divided, some would divide it into three categories: mutawatir al-lafzi, ma'nawi, and amali. Some would suffice by dividing it into two categories: lafzi or daruri, and ma'nawi. Yeah. So what is mutawatir? Mutawatir is basically that which has been transmitted by an indefinite number of transmitters at each level of the sanad, that it is impossible for them, and the transmitters, to come together to perpetrate a lie against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that is the definition of mutawatir. Don't worry, in our next set of slides, lesson 6b, we will go through the definition in much more detail. Hadith Ahad or Sunnah Ahad or Khabar Ahad, on the other hand, are basically any reports which does not fulfill the conditions of Mutawatir. So that which does not fall under the category of Mutawatir would automatically fall under the category of Ahad. And let me remind you again, this categorization is based on the number of transmitters, the number of rawi, the number of ruwat. Mutawatir lafzi, Mutawatir lafzi or daruri are basically facts mentioned verbally by the masses, or necessarily known facts. Mutawatir ma'nawi, on the other hand, are facts concluded from an aggregate of individual reports or sets of hadith. We will look at some examples, so this will be clearer inshallah. Okay, so examples of mutawatir lafzi or mutawatir daruri are incontrovertible historical facts related to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it's a well-established fact, for example, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made hijrah from Mecca to Medina, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away in Medina, that his mosque is in Medina, his mimbar was in Medina, he honored his companions. All of this, including zakat, is an Islamic obligation, fasting is an Islamic obligation. So if one tells you this, do you investigate? Is this sahih? Is this actually a sound? No. Why? Because these are well-established facts, which one cannot deny. They are incontrovertible historical facts related to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this has been passed on from one generation to another without any disputes. So this or these are considered to be mutawatir lafzi or daruri, meaning that no one can dispute that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did migrate to Medina from Mecca, or that there are 5 salawat in one day, 5 daily prayers. No one can dispute, and this has been going on from one generation to the other and until the day of judgment, inshallah. So mutawatir, literally, it means recurrence, repetition, and succession. A tawatur basically means something which repeats itself, meaning that it is recurrent. Okay. So technically, the definition of hadith mutawatir, as I mentioned just now, it is shared by an indefinite number of people in such a way that precludes the possibility of their agreement to perpetuate a lie upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is an illustration, meaning that in each level of the sanad, there are many people who narrate or report this hadith from on each tabaq, each level of the sanad, that it is impossible for them to come together to perpetuate a lie against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ahad, on the other hand, literally, it is a plural of wahid, so it basically means solitary or one. Solitary meaning it is confined solely, like solitary confinement. So it is basically a statement reported by 1, 2, or more, which has not yet fulfilled the requirements and conditions of mutawatir. So that which does not fulfill the conditions of mutawatir, automatically it is considered as ahad. Okay. This is an example where we find that there are several reports, several individual hadith, which when combined together and analyzed as a whole, it would, or one would arrive at a certain concept. Okay. For example, here we have these individual reports. These individual reports: a man is not to look at the aura of a man, a woman is not to look at the aura of a woman. A man is not to be alone with a man under one garment, and a woman is not to be alone with a woman under one garment. And another hadith which is considered to be mursal, and weak, is this hadith: when a woman reaches the age of menstruation, it does not suit her that she displays the parts of body except this and this, and the Prophet ﷺ pointed to his face and hands. And then there is another anecdote whereby the Prophet ﷺ was sitting together with Abu Bakr and Omar, and then Uthman entered, and then the Prophet ﷺ covered his knees, upon the entrance of Uthman. Because initially the Prophet ﷺ's thighs were exposed, were uncovered. But when Uthman entered, the Prophet ﷺ covered his knees. And the Prophet ﷺ made a remark, should I not feel shy before one, before whom the angels of heaven feel shy? Okay. And then we have also this hadith in Sahih Muslim regarding one who exposes the aura, and the woman who will be naked in spite of their being dressed, who are seduced to wrong path and seduce others with their hair high like humps. These women will not get into paradise and they will not receive the order of paradise. So this is another hadith which depicts this concept of aura. So basically, we have this collection of individual reports that if we compile them together and analyze them together, what we would arrive at is the concept of aura. So this is known as Mutawatir Ma'nawi. Mutawatir Ma'nawi. So the concept is counted as Sunnah or Mutawatir Ma'nawi despite differences among various madhabs concerning the particulars. So the concept of aura here, it is agreed upon by the various schools of legal thought or the various schools of Islamic jurisprudence. However, when it comes to details, whether the knees of the man is part of the aura or not, then there are differences of opinion. However, having said that, despite the differences in detail, that concept of aura still is valid across all madhahib, across all schools of Islamic jurisprudence. So this is just to illustrate that individual reports of hadith, if collected together and analyzed as a whole, one can arrive at a concept which is agreed upon by all, which is undisputable, and this is known as Mutawatir Ma'nawi. Now we come to the issue of an individual narrator, which is found in the Sanad. And this is to illustrate that when it comes to an individual narrator, there might be differences of opinion regarding the narrator's credibility. And that is why at the beginning we mentioned that Ijtihad is involved when it comes to this matter. Because if there is a dispute regarding a certain narrator of hadith, this will have an impact or consequence on the soundness of that hadith. So here we have, for example, in this case, an individual narrator by the name of Abu Ja'far al-Razi, Isa ibn Abdullah, or known as Abu Isa ibn Mahan, from Rai, who was born in the year 90 after Hijrah and passed away in the year 160 after Hijrah. So he is one of the narrators of this hadith, in which it says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam qanata shahran yad'u alayhim thumma tarakahu wa amma fi subhi falam yazal yaqnut hatta faraqa ad-dunya. This is regarding qunut, qunut in daily prayers. So according to this hadith, which was narrated by Abu Ja'far al-Razi, apparently the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made qunut in all the 5 daily prayers, for 1 month. Then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not do so except for Salatul Subhi, except for Salatul Fajr, except for the Subuh prayer. Okay? So that is why we have in the Shafi'i madhab, for example, the recommendation for one to perform Qunut prayer during Salatul Fajr, while in other madhahib, in other schools of Islamic jurisprudence, there is no such recommendation, except for certain purposes, but not to be done regularly. Okay. So according to Yahya ibn Ma'in, this narrator is thiqah, trustworthy. According to Abu Hatim, he is thiqah, saduq, trustworthy, fairly honest. According to Nasai, on the other hand, laysa bil qawi, he is not that excellent. And according to Abu Zur'ah, that yahumu kathiran, he erred frequently, and that his narration may be recorded, but he sometimes made mistakes. Imam Ahmad said that he is salih al-hadith, his hadith is fairly acceptable. Ibn al-Madini said that he was trustworthy. Amr ibn Ali said that fihi dha'f, that he displayed some weaknesses. Asaji said laysa bimutqin, he is not among the diligent. According to Ad-Dashtaki, he solely reported the hadith of Qunut, the hadith in question here. He is the sole transmitter of this hadith. And according to Ibn Hibban, was always the only person who reported certain spurious akhbar from famous figures. So as you can see, there are differences of opinion regarding the narrator in question, which then would have an impact on the soundness of the hadith, the differences of opinion on the soundness of this hadith due to the differences of opinion on the credibility of the narrator in question. Coming back to Hadith Mutawatir and Hadith Ahad, Mutawatir, it is automatically authentic. So if a hadith is mutawatir, be it ma'nawi, be it lafzi or daruri, it is automatically authentic. So there is no need to search for the credibility of its narrators. So there is no need to go through that process of verifying the credibility of the transmitters or narrators. And it prescribes and engenders certainty and definitive knowledge. Yeah, certainty and definitive knowledge, or necessary knowledge, daruri. And as such, it is said that one who rejects sunnah, which is mutawatir, that would make one fall into disbelief, kufr. Why? Because one rejects definitive and certain knowledge, ilm yaqeen. When it comes to Hadith Ahad, its authenticity is not confirmed. So that is why one needs to examine the credibility of its narrators. Yeah? So the authenticity is not confirmed. Therefore, it requires further examination on the credibility of its transmitters or narrators. So what is the value of Hadith Ahad? It is basically dhanni knowledge or speculative knowledge or iktisabi knowledge, acquired knowledge. Meaning that it is not definitive, it is not certain. Yeah? And as such, as we looked at the hadith on Qunut, there is a differences of opinion regarding this hadith because there is a dispute regarding the narrator by the name of Abu Ja'far al-Razi Isa Amni Abdullah. So here we will explain further the concept of ijtihad when it comes to the verification or when analyzing the soundness of hadith. Okay, so ijtihad is basically to exert oneself industriously in requesting or in acquiring knowledge. Badlul majhud fi talab al-ilm. Yeah, so a mujtahid is basically an expert. And when it comes to analyzing hadith and also looking at the narrators of hadith, such is involved, ijtihad is involved. Okay, so the ijtihad in the case of khabar al-wahid is the determination of the veracity of a narrator. If the veracity is approved through a potential mean, there's a high probability of truthfulness. It is then an obligation upon the mujtahid to accept the narrator's report. So identifying the divine intention in a certain ruling based on a number of clues and signs, basically through qiyas, is similar to the determination of a narrator's veracity. There is no difference between the two tasks, the task of a mujtahid in fiqh and the task of a mujtahid in hadith. So this is just to illustrate to you that ijtihad is not only confined to matters of fiqh, but also to matters of hadith, yeah, especially in establishing the soundness or the position of a hadith. It requires the hadith expert here to exercise his or her ijtihad to determine the credibility of the narrators, which would in fact then the soundness of that hadith. So this is just an example of experts in hadith, or you would say mujtahid in hadith. As you can see, for example, here we have Abu Hafiz Yahya ibn Ma'in, who has analyzed more than 600,000 hadith. Yeah, Abu Zur'a also more than 100,000 hadith. So they are considered to be experts in the field of hadith. They are mujtahid in this respect when it comes to hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when we mention ijtihad, and we also this is also exhibited when we looked at the hadith of Qunut, yeah, and the narrator in question, there were differences of opinion. And indeed, when we look at the issue of ijtihad, one cannot escape the fact that there will be differences of opinion. These are basically anecdotes, yeah, to prove the point that differences of opinion is legitimate in that sense, or is something which is normal. Okay, I won't go through this example. We'll go through another example. Okay, the dispute among the angels. So even the angels had a dispute, or had disputes. So this is in a famous hadith, the story of a man who killed 99 persons. Then when he met a monk, yeah, the monks, and he asked the monk whether there is any chance for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept his repentance, and he said no. Yeah, the monk replied in negative. So he killed the monk. So now the total number of persons he killed is 100. And then he met a learned man, yeah, who directed him to a scholar. And he asked the scholar whether there is still a chance for his repentance to be accepted. And he has already killed 100 people. Yeah. And what was the response of the scholar? He said, "Who stands between you and repentance? Go to such and such land. There you will find people devoted to salah and worship of Allah. Join them in worship and do not come back to your land because it is an evil place." So another benefit from this hadith that we can gather is that the environment that one is important, yeah, and it affects one's spiritual well-being, yeah. So this man followed the advice of the scholar and headed towards this place. However, along the way he passed away, he died. So there was a dispute between the angel of mercy and the angel of torment, and the angels of mercy and the angels of torment or angels of punishment had a dispute. So should this man, yeah, be punished, or should he be forgiven? Okay. Then another angel who came in the form of a man, yeah, form of a human being, was the arbiter in this case. Yeah, was the arbiter in this case. And when the case was brought to him, he said, measure the distance between the two lands. He will be considered belonging to the land to which he is nearer. So they measured and found him closer to the land of piety where he intended to go. And so the angels of mercy collected his soul. Yeah. So this is just to illustrate, even the angels had disputes or differences of opinion. So in this case, the angels of mercy wanted to take the soul of the man, and the angels of torment also wanted to take the soul of this person, and both parties had their own arguments. And in the course of history, we will also find that even the companions of the Prophet ﷺ had differences of opinion. When it came to instruction or order from the Prophet ﷺ, as in this case, when the companions were returning from the expedition or battle of Al-Ahzab, and the Prophet ﷺ said, "None of you should offer the Asr prayer but at Bani Qurayza." So the time of Asr prayer came, on the way. So some of them decided to offer the Salah. Some decided, no, I would not perform the Salah except at Bani Qurayza, as per Prophet's instruction. So those who decided to perform the Salah despite not arriving at Bani Qurayza, they said that the Prophet ﷺ's intention from that statement was for them to rush or not delay or to haste towards Bani Qurayza. So when this case was presented to the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ did not blame anyone. He did not say, "Oh, you were right, you were wrong." No, meaning the Prophet ﷺ accepted. Those who prayed along the way, it is okay. Those who waited until they arrived at Bani Qurayza, also it is okay. So this is just to illustrate that even the companions had differences of opinion and exercised their own ijtihad when it came to the order of the Prophet ﷺ. And in a hadith recorded by Al-Bukhari and Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ said, when a judge utilizes his skill of judgment and comes to a right decision, he will have a double reward, ajran. But when he uses his judgment and commits a mistake, he will have a single reward. So that act of utilizing one's skill of judgment, or in this case, ijtihad, is an act which will be rewarded. One will be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for exercising ijtihad. Whether the person arrives at the right or wrong conclusion is another matter, but the act of ijtihad itself would make one deserving of a reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And according to Imam Shafi'i, when it comes to the people of knowledge, or when it comes to knowledge in general, people are of different levels. Their position with regard to it follows their degrees in learning. Hence, a seeker of knowledge should exert as much as he can, perseveres as possible as he can, and purifies his intention only for God, so he may acquire knowledge through nas, istinbat, and also raghbat ilallah, spiritual devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's not only on the basis of nas, the text, but also one needs to exercise his intellectual capabilities. And also there is that element of spirituality whereby one who is close spiritually to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then often he or she would be given some sort of guidance to arrive at a correct judgment when it comes to the acquirement of knowledge. So again here, this is just to illustrate that ijtihad is involved in determining the credibility of a transmitter, and there might be differences of opinion which would then affect the judgment regarding the hadith in question. So some scholars might view a certain hadith in sahih, but others might argue that it is da'if. So this is just to provide a background why such differences might exist. Okay, and all of what we have mentioned applies to hadith ahad. Why? Because when it comes to mutawatir, it is definitive knowledge, necessary knowledge, and one need not look into the narrators of the hadith in question, But when it comes to Hadith Ahad, one needs to exercise. The scholars in this case need to exercise the Ijtihad to determine the veracity or the soundness of the Hadith in question. Okay? Now we look at Hadith Ahad and Mutawatir in much more detail. So again, based on the number of transmitters, Hadith can be divided into two. We have Hadith Mutawatir and Hadith Ahad. As we have seen just now, two categories of Hadith Mutawatir, which is Lafzi or Daruri and also Ma'nawi. And we can also add another categorization where we differentiate between the practices which we have inherited from one generation to another as Mutawatir Amali. And we will look at some examples to make this clearer. Hadith Ahad, on the other hand, can be divided into three types. You have what is known as Hadith Gharib, Aziz, and also Mashhur. And we will look at their respective divisions. We've gone through the definition of Mutawatir just now. Okay. And the issue of what is the number? Because in the definition it is mentioned an indefinite number. So is there a particular number which we should look for? So there are differences of opinion when it comes to the number. Some say that it is 4, and more than 3, 5, 7, 10, 12, 40, 70, etc. So there is this differences of opinion when it comes to the number. Okay. However, having said that, the main thing is that one needs to establish that it has been narrated by a large number of transmitters at each level of the sanad, and that it is impossible for them to come together to perpetrate a lie against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So why this hadith is termed as mutawatir? It is because of the involvement of many people in its chain of transmitters. So what's the criteria of hadith mutawatir? Number one, an indefinite number or large number of transmitters. Secondly, this large number of transmitters or this multiplicity of transmitters should remain to each level of the sanad, and that it is impossible for them to come together to perpetrate lie against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it must also be based on sense perception, meaning that one listens or hears that it is from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or one sees the action of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, witnessing that action. The position, we mentioned this just now, it prescribes certainty and definitive knowledge. It is automatically authentic, and it is necessary to believe in its authenticity, such as the authenticity of the Quran. Hence, denial might lead to kufr, might lead to disbelief. Mutawatir lafzi, or daruri, mutawatir ma'nawi, and mutawatir amali here. Mutawatir lafzi, meaning it is verbally recurrent. So it is that which has been reported with the same wordings, verbatim, in all different sanads, to the extent that the text of the hadith is literally identical. And this is an example of a hadith which is mutawatir lafzi, meaning in all the chains of transmission, the hadith is reported in this way. Exactly word by word. وَأَنْ كَذَّبَ عَلَيَّ مُتَعَمِّدًا فَلْيَتَبَوَّأْ مَقْعَدَهُ مِنَ النَّارِ. One who lies about me deliberately must prepare himself for a seat in the hell fire. Mutawatir ma'nawi, that which has been reported with different wordings but all lead to an identical meaning. For example, hadith on the manners of performing salah, such as the raising of hands during certain intervals, or that there is a number of sujoods in one rak'ah, a number of ruku'. So there are various individual reports which point to the fact that that is the way of performing salat. Okay. And then we have mutawatir amali, that which is known from the religion and is continuously practiced. without disagreement. Yeah, for example, performing the 5 daily prayers, or performing the Hajj, or fasting in the month of Ramadan. So this is categorized as mutawatir amal. Or you could combine it with mutawatir ma'nawi, in that sense. Mutawatir lafzi, under the category of mutawatir lafzi or daruri, meaning that it is necessary knowledge. It cannot be disputed. However, you can also use this categorization to make a differentiation between mutawatir lafzi, ma'nawi, and also amali. These are just some examples of compilations where you can find Hadith Mutawatir. So the scholars have actually compiled Hadith Mutawatir, and these are some examples of those compilations. Ahad, we've gone through the definition just now, okay? That which does not meet the conditions or criteria of Mutawatir. So what's the position of Hadith Ahad? We've mentioned this also. It indicates probability and possibility rather than yaqeen, and as such it could be authentic, it could be agreeable, hasan, it could be weak, da'if, or it could even be forged. Okay, and to determine the authenticity of the hadith ahad in question, as we mentioned just now, we need to exercise, the scholars of hadith exercised their own ijtihad. And when fulfilling all its requirements, acting upon a hadith which is ahad becomes obligatory. However, it is not necessary to believe in its authenticity. Therefore, its denial does not lead to disbelief, unlike hadith mutawatir. So these are the divisions of hadith ahad. You have hadith ahad, which is gharib, and then gharib is divided into nisbi and mutlaq. What is hadith gharib in this sense? It is basically that which is transmitted by one transmitter at any level or stage of the sanad. Yeah. So if there is only one transmitter at any level or at any stage of the sanad, usually at the level of the companion, if there is only one companion, for example, who transmits that hadith, this hadith is known as hadith gharib. Yeah. And why is it termed gharib? Because literally gharib means what? It means strange, peculiar. Yeah. So this hadith is considered to be strange because only one narrator transmitted it at any level of the sanad. So if at other levels of the sanad there are many transmitters, it does not matter. It still is termed, that hadith in question. So even though at other levels of the sanad there are many transmitters, but at one of the level there is only one, the hadith is still considered to be hadith gharib. Okay. So how do we identify? A single transmitter is found transmitting it from a well-known imam. Yeah. So there is only one transmitter who transmits it from a well-known imam. Or it is solely transmitted by a group of transmitters from a certain region. So here the strangeness occurs. So even though there are a few transmitters of this hadith, but because all of them come from one region, it's also considered as hadith gharib. All transmitters from one locality transmits from transmitters of another locality. So apparently in the sanad, transmitters from locality A transmits from transmitters from locality B. Yeah. And you do not find transmitters from locality C, D, E transmitting from transmitters from locality B. So which makes it strange. So gharib is divided into nisbi and mutlaq. So that which is strangeness is at the beginning. Change is what beginning to origin, asal. So that which is strangeness is at the origin of the sanad, and the origin is the level of the companion. So gharib mutlaq. So if there is only one companion who transmitted the hadith, although many tabi'een transmits that hadith, but because there is only one companion who transmitted that hadith, this hadith is known as gharib mutlaq. Okay. Gharib nisbi, on the other hand, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani has divided it into several categories. For example, if only one sole reliable transmitter transmits this hadith, yeah, at any level, or transmitted solely by a particular transmitter from another particular transmitter. So basically, in the sanad, you find only A transmitting from B, only A transmitting from B, or transmitted solely by a group from a particular region. Yeah, for example, only transmitters from Kufa, yeah, from Kufa transmitted that hadith, or transmitted solely by a group from a particular region from another group. We've mentioned this just now. Only transmitters from locality A transmitters from locality B, while other transmitters from locality C, D, E, F, G until Z, they do not transmit from the transmitters from locality B. Okay. Where can we find the compilations of Hadith Gharib? We have, for example, Gharaib Malik by Darul-Qutni, Al-Afrad wa Al-Gharaib by Darul-Qutni as well. So these are just some examples of books in which you can find Hadith Gharib. Now we move on to Aziz. Literally, it means very rare, seldom, to the extent it is assumed to be in non-existence, but it can also mean strong or solid. So it is that which its transmitters are not less than 2 in every level stage, although in some levels or stages it might be more. Yeah. ما لا يكون رواته أقل من 2 في كل طبقة وإن زاد عليه في بعض الطبقات. Meaning that at one of the levels of the sanad, there are 2 transmitters. So in the case of Hadith Gharib, only 1. So in the case of Hadith Aziz, 2. So just remember this number 2. It is termed Aziz due to infrequent narration or it being strengthened by other transmitters. So a narration agreed by 2 transmitters throughout the whole chain, or at some level, there should be no fewer than 2 transmitters. Okay. So if there are only 2 transmitters at any level of the sanad, that deems the hadith to be Ahad Aziz. So now we move on to Hadith Ahad, another category of Hadith Ahad, which is Mashhur, Again, just bear in mind that we are looking at Hadith based on the number of transmitters. That's why we see again and again numbers here. We're playing with numbers here. So here, the definition of Hadith Mashhur is that which its transmitters are not less than 3 in each level of transmission, and if there are more than 3 at one level or all levels, these additional number of transmitters do not reach the level of Mutawatir. Yeah, so 3 or more, as long as it does not reach the level of Mutawatir. So this is known as Mashhur Istilahi. And then you have Mashhur Ghair Istilahi, which basically has nothing to do with the number of transmitters. But because one might be confused when I mention Hadith Mashhur, what does it actually mean? So if Hadith Mashhur, then we are referring to the number of transmitters, that is Mashhur Istilahi. We are talking about a Hadith in Ahad in which there are not less than 3 transmitters at any level of the sanad. Yeah. And if there are more, the number does not reach the level of tawatur. So here, Mashhur Ghair Istilahi or Mashhur Lughawi means basically a hadith which is just popular. Yeah? A hadith which is popular and there is no definitive conditions. Meaning that hadith which is popular can be authentic, it can even be fabricated, but because it is just popular. Okay. So what's the position of Hadith Mashhur? It could be authentic, it could be Hasan, it could be even forged. And when it comes to a Hadith which is popular, as I mentioned just now, its popularity does not necessitate its authenticity. Okay? And these are certain compilations in which you can find Hadith Mashhur Lughawi. Yeah. Al-Maqasid al-Hasana fi Bayan Kathir min al-Hadith المشتهرة على السنة. Okay, so these are basically hadith which are popular on the tongue of people. Okay, so we have gone through Hadith Mutawatir and Hadith Ahad. So basically you have to be familiar with the definitions, and when we mention Hadith Ahad and Hadith Mutawatir, just bear in mind that we are talking about hadith based on the number of transmitters. Yeah, and Hadith Mutawatir is basically that which has been transmitted by an indefinite number of transmitters, and this multiplicity of transmitters occur at each level of the sanad. And if a hadith is mutawatir, it is authentic. You need not investigate its authenticity, and it provides definitive knowledge or certain knowledge. Okay. On the other hand, hadith ahad, it is that which does not fulfill the requirements of mutawatir, and as such, one needs to investigate, one needs to exert one's effort to analyze the hadith to determine whether it is sahih, not definitive knowledge. It is based on speculative knowledge or iktisabi, acquired knowledge, and it is open to ijtihad, and as such there might be differences of opinion regarding the transmitter in question and the hadith in question. So that is why we mentioned ijtihad and the issue of differences of opinion, which might lead to the differences of determining the differences in the position of the hadith, yeah, whether it is sahih, hasan, da'if, or even mawdu'. So that is the main takeaway, inshallah, from this lecture. Yeah, you have to be familiar with the definitions of mutawatir and ahad, and also what does it entail. Okay, don't worry too much about the divisions when it comes to hadith ahad. Yeah, but mutawatir, when it comes to certain examples, I think you should be familiar with that, especially when it comes to undisputable facts, which makes the khabar, the information, mutawatir. Okay, I think we'll suffice with that. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله العظيم لي ولكم. So if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask through any of our social media platforms or even WhatsApp. Let me check, are there any issues? Okay, stay safe everyone, take care. We are in RMCO, Recovery Movement Control Order, so inshallah, hopefully things will get better soon. الآن إن شاء الله. السلام عليكم.